me tell you a story. One time, I was sitting at a red light in Florida. I was going to a shopping mall, like, whatever. I think I was driving to Micro Center all the way up in Ohio. Most of my family's moved out of Oregon to Ohio now. Like, no family remains, even my parents and everything. That's how I inherited the RAV4, because they bought a Corolla there. Anyway, so I was driving up to Ohio to visit Micro Center, and of course my family, but really Micro Center, because that store's the best. And I was sitting there, and this car pulled up next to me, and it was this weird Toyota thing, and I saw it in my side mirrors as I was driving, and I was driving distracted. Like, I stayed at that light just a little bit past when it turned green, when usually I'm the person to floor the car and, get on with my life. And for the life of me, I couldn't tell what this car is. And this video is to answer the question of what the heck this thing is. Because I'm here to tell you that, that era of Toyota, this generation of Camry, like the early 2010s, late thousands, I'm here to tell you that the Toyota Venza was the best Toyota ever produced out of that generation. Better than the RAV4s, better than the Highlanders, better than the Camrys, better than the Corollas, better than everything. This is the best car to come out of that era. It is a top 3 best Toyota of all time. And I'm going to tell you why in this video. Toyota is, and always will be, at least to some extent, a company of small, efficient sedans. And that's what they were in the 90s. So when the SUV craze happened and they launched the RAV4, they knew this really wasn't going to sell with their audience. The people that bought Toyotas were rental fleets, car salesmen. Just as Stan said in Golden Girls, I'm just what I've always feared most, another bald guy with a Camry. And you want to know what? Toyota was fine with that. They liked their buyer base. They kept buying cars. They kept buying new cars. They appreciated Toyota. They came in for service. Toyota loved their buyers. So when they created the RAV4 for a demographic that was not their usual buyer base, and it sold relatively well, Toyota was happy. Sales are good. But they wanted to create something more in line with the average Toyota buyer. And this is where the roots of the Toyota Venza are planted, way back down in the 90s. But to understand this, we have to know that the Toyota RAV4 was not the only Toyota SUV sold during the time. And just like all Toyotas, it starts with a Lexus. The Lexus RX, ever since its inception in the late 1990s, was a sales hit. People loved it. Since then, off-roaders weren't really a thing for people who drove regular cars. And by regular cars, I mean the sedans of the time. To them, when people complain about things that aren't really for them. Like, if I walk into Hot Topic, which it's like the antithesis of what I am, and I'm like, oh, I don't really appreciate this, someone's going to say, well, it's not for you. And that's kind of what the RAV4 was, and a lot of the CRV and all that. It was kind of, this is cool, but it's really not for you. The Lexus RX was for the average sedan buyers. It had the comfort of, a nice Acura Legend, something very familiar, a very familiar shape, just like the Legend. And the outside of it was rugged and gruff, but also stylish, and filled with, the Lexus design cues that you were expecting from a Toyota of this time. And people loved it. Now, the RAV4 was the volume sales out of the two. It sold the most. But what really got the hearts of people was the Lexus RX. Now, we've covered the bases, but there's one other contributing factor. Unlike other car companies, when a Toyota doesn't sell or people aren't happy with it, Toyota doesn't take it personal. They don't immediately axe it off, say that was a mistake and that was terrible. Instead of thinking about it that way, they think, how can we fix it? How can we make it more appealing? How can we make this automobile fit our average buyer? By the time of the 1980s, the Toyota Camry wagon was a failure. It wasn't selling, people thought it was old, it was a joke, they didn't sell well, dealerships had a hard time getting rid of them, and the people who liked these wagons, genuinely, they kept buying them, but everyone else, they thought that we could leave this in the 90s, and Toyota agreed, so in the late 1990s, they killed it off. But Toyota knew that this was not going to be the last people would see of the Camry wagon. What if, instead of just, scrapping the idea and saying wagons are terrible, what if we try and make a modern-day wagon? Look at these 3 Camrys. One from the 2000s and early 2000s, late 90s. One from the 2000s, the mid-2000s. And the last one from the late 2000s, early 2010s. Which one of these stands out to you the most? Well, the jump from the 90s Camry to the mid-2000s Camry isn't a whole lot. All they did was restylize the front, reshape the back, and it's pretty much the same car. It even has the same rear split, front split grille. Except this time they split the fog lights off into 2 little separate little cheekbones and made it a little bit more pointy. Not a huge difference. The cars are the same shape. But the new 2007 Toyota Camry was going to be different. This Camry was going to be the Camry to revolutionize Camrys. It was going to be bigger. It was going to meet all the safety recommendations. It was going to be safer. You're going to have more interior room. You're going to have a lower dashboard, better visibility. It's going to be the Camry that everyone's going to want to go to. And that's not going to be the only change. These other Camrys, they were flat. There wasn't a whole lot you could do with them. You couldn't manipulate them into the car, this MPV that Toyota was trying to create. But the new 2007 Camry, it was taller, it was wider, it was stronger, it could hold on more modifications. So Toyota decided this was the year, 2007, that they would launch or start working on their brand new concept. The only issue was Toyota didn't know what car they were making. Like what are we talking about here? First of all, in the top left, they didn't know if they wanted it to be a Lexus. They were like, we know what we want this car to be, right? But should it be a Lexus? Because the Lexus RX, it was successful, right? People already envisioned Lexus as having the solution to the SUV problem for sedans, so why not just make it a Lexus? And then they put them away. This is like that one Golden Girls episode. I took out my photos of Blanche, and then I put them away. And then they were like, what if we make this a family car? What if we make it a Sienna, but big and Camry-like, with 3 big doors, a true family hauler? Well, the people that are buying these cars, according to demographics, really don't have children. They're more for empty nesters, They're more for older people, which is Toyota's main base, that have stopped having kids, They're done, the kids are out of the house, and they just want a car. So a minivan is no use to those people. They're trying to get out of their minivans, not get back into another minivan. Then they thought, the Prius is good, why don't we just do that again and call it a hybrid and make it a Yaris or something? So they created the Toyota Hybrid X. And, the hybrid was too expensive, the hybrid system wasn't good enough to power a car of that size, and it really looked like a space potato. So finally they decided, you want to know what, maybe the solution to everything is being a Camry after all, and we landed on the Toyota FX ST concept. Also, just a quick side editor's note here, I love seeing Toyota in their element. I see these stupid Toyota concept cars like the LFA and all that stuff, and the LFA is neat, but other cars like it, like the weird Roadster thing, and I'm like, those Toyota designers must hate the job that they're doing. It might be fun for them, for a few of them, but I think this is really where Toyota's element was. Imagine if instead of bullshit, concept cars that we get today, which is the Toyota that can, blow, ridiculous stuff, like Roadsters and hybrid convertibles. Imagine if instead of having cars like that, Toyota did this again, and they tried to figure out a solution to a problem, and attacking every single angle of it. Could you imagine how good the Camry would be, And imagine how fun this was for the designers. This wasn't designing a Camry anymore, this is what the people wanted. Some of these are pretty futuristic, some of these not so much. And you want to know what? I'm glad we landed with the Venza that we got. Correction, actually it was called the FTSX. People ask me, how do you remember so much knowledge? The answer is, I don't. But this, the FTSX concept, is what we got that was closest to a Venza. And you want to know what? It made sense. Think about it for a minute. If it were a Lexus, it would seem too expensive, and average families that don't want to splurge and just bought Toyotas because they were cheap wouldn't look for it. They'd be like, nah, I'm okay. Some families don't like to treat themselves after they've had kids. They just want to get another reliable, dependable vehicle. For some people, a vehicle really isn't a fashion statement. So having it with a Toyota badge made sense. Also, when Toyota first shipped to the United States, they had 2 cars. They had the Crown and the Land Cruiser. The Land Cruiser would give, go anywhere ruggedness to the Crown, and the Crown would give reliability to the Land Cruiser. The Camry would give reliability and its reputation onto the Venza, and the Venza's versatility would make the new Camry look good. It was almost, and I mean almost, a perfect system. So let's look at the Venza that we actually got. And this is the Venza that we got. It looks like a Camry, it tastes like a Camry, it sounds like a Camry, has the same engine as a Camry, and it has the same design elements. They shortened the fog light size with the new Camry from the previous Camry, so this has similar fog lights that are shortened even more. It has the exact same measurements as the rear bottom grille for the other Camry. The only difference was they widened the front larger top grille to make it look more SUV-ish, and gave it that distinctive headlight shape. Now, a lot of people will say that this is ugly and gaudy, and to an extent, I kind of agree with it. It does kind of look like an obese Camry. Not as bad as the Infinities, though. Those things are the ugliest SUVs I've ever seen. But I think they actually did a good job at the design. And we can all be thankful that if you look at the original FTSX, they didn't make it look like something that's going to bite your hand off. I mean, that car has an underbite. That is not good. It literally has an underbite. That thing looks like it could crack a walnut with its bottom bumper cover there. So at least they made it look respectable, and I'm happy with it, okay? But the issue is, there's not one Venza, but 2 in this story, and they are almost completely different from each other, which makes it all really annoying, and I'm not going to be like, oh, well, it's only the first generation of President, because that's sloppy. So now we're moving into the history of the second generation. Okay, the history for the second generation isn't nearly as interesting as the first, so I'm just going to sum it up before making my final point in this section. Essentially, they wanted a car that was like a RAV4, but not a RAV4, but also kind of sporty, but also kind of family-oriented, so they came out with the Venza and revived a dead nameplate, basically sharing zero resemblance to the original Venza, but solving a similar purpose. Now, a lot of people say that these two generations were unrelated and that they should be counted as separate cars, but I disagree because of the RAV4 effect. Every single time that a Venza is introduced and then dies, the RAV4 gets more obese. Let's look at this RAV4. You know, if you've been listening to the story so far and what Toyota wanted to do here, you may think, that's what people use RAV4s now. People go out, they buy RAV4s, it's a family vehicle, it's for families. Well, back in the thousands, that's not what it was for. It was a sport utility vehicle. Sport. People liked it sporty. Teens liked it. You know, not like my parents. Nowadays, many parents do drive a RAV4. As soon as my mother stopped, my grandmother did buy a Venza, but as soon as my mother's kids were out of the house and we got rid of the Honda Odyssey, she bought a RAV4 because RAV4s were just the family vehicle of the time. And here's what I'm talking about, the RAV4 effect. If you look at the RAV4s on the left of the screen, one is bigger than the other, but that's for other reasons, and I'll make a video on it and shitification. I'll deal with that later. But these are objectively smaller than the vehicles, the RAV4s on the right. For the set on the bottom, the previous generation RAV4 had a V6. It was small but powerful. It wasn't designed as a family vehicle. You didn't go out and buy a RAV4 with a tire hanging off the back because, you know, you just wanted to be off-roading, you know. Then, in 2013, when the Venza wasn't selling well, and Toyota finally said, you want to know what, it's a trip, and decided that they were going to make the RAV4 the new Venza, they removed the tire off the back. All the commercials for the original RAV4s, up to this point, you know, like 2013, were all like young people. You know, young people jumping for the keys of the RAV4. Young people going down to the beach. Instead, with the 2013 RAV4, it was a family loading groceries into the back. And there was this wizard flying around, and he said, you can have whatever you want. And the mom said, ooh, could we take the tire off the back? That was a very, very, very brief explanation of the commercial. But the RAV4 went from, you know, a young person, fun brand, to more of a family car. And that was completely intentional. Toyota had the failure of Scion. They had the failure of multiple other, like Prius C. They had so many failures that were happening for young people. They just said, you want to know what? I give up. Screw the young people. Make the RAV4 an old lady's car, and that's fine. Now, I personally own this generation of RAV4, and I think it's great. But would I take the thing off-roading? No, that is a very on-road car. The previous generation, an off-road vehicle, a sport utility vehicle. This other one is more like a, you know, MPV, you know, like multi-purpose vehicle, not really sport. Now let's look at the RAV4 at the top, you know, top left. Is it really a sporty vehicle? No. Is it boxy? Yeah, but it's still a little bit sporty. And it's not, like, if we compare it to the bottom row, it's going to be like, well, that's the biggest one and stuff like that. But when you compare it to the 2026, this thing is small. The 2026 has a higher hood. It looks more like a Highlander. You have more room around the back. You have more cargo space, more trunk space. And again, it's marketed towards families. We got the Wilderness Edition for the 2024 RAV4 because the Venza took some of that family heat off the RAV4. The Venza acts as a damper. It just sucks up some of the strain that the RAV4 has to go with. Because the RAV4 is, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. The RAV4 is to the customer whatever the customer wants the RAV4 to be. Could be a family car, could be a first car, could be a fun car, could be an off-roader, could be whatever. And Toyota was trying to placate into this. And they had an issue in 2017. It was doing too much. They had an adventure edition. They had a hybrid. They had a cheap one. They had an expensive one. They had one with leather. They had one with cloth. They were just going through, pacing back and forth around the room so many times their legs hurt, just trying to figure out how to make this one car fit all of those roles. And finally they said, I give up, and they created the second generation Venza. Now, I'm not going to show a picture of it here, because there's an entire section about it, you know, for two laser actors, I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, so that took some of the heat off the RAV4, and then they created the Wilderness Edition, you know, and then the TRD Edition, and that really helped bring the RAV4 back up to cool status, you know, more fun things, you know, it doesn't have to fit into this tiny, but yet huge box that this big car had to be shoved into. And now that the Venza's gone, the RAV4 has to soak up all the crap that everyone wants out of it, and that's causing it to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like Toyota is a feeder. They just have this issue. They just keep feeding the RAV4 until it's so obese it can't even stand on its own anymore. And that's what's happening here, because You ever heard a jack of all trades is a master of none? That's kind of what's happening here. The current RAV4 isn't nice for anybody, except for maybe some families. Families don't like it because it doesn't have a third row. Young people don't like it because it's not sporty enough, doesn't have a tire on the back, not great for off-roaders. Off-roaders don't like it because the ground clearance is low, the hood is high. Old people don't like it because they can't see over the steering wheel, much less the hood. People in general don't like it because it's too expensive, because it's much bigger than the previous generation. Nobody likes the RAV4 anymore, and yet the RAV4 is, according to Toyota, the best it's ever been. It's the Venza effect. You need something there to dampen the RAV4. And now, Toyota's doing it again with the they tried it again. They were so desperate to just get some weight off that RAV4 because everyone hated it. So they brought out the CHR for young people. That failed. Now they're bringing out the CHR2 electric boogaloo to try and save the RAV4. That way the RAV4, like, what are we doing here? Much less the Corolla Cross. What are we doing? By the end of this entire debacle, we're going to have like 7 different SUVs that are the same size as the RAV4. The Corolla Cross is basically a RAV4 from 10 years ago. The CHR is a RAV4 from 20 years ago, and the Crown Signia is a RAV4 from about 10 years from now. It's like, guys, can we just figure this out? I mean, nothing should be this difficult. And Toyota just needs to get it right. Maybe they'll get it right with the young people and being cheap. Maybe they'll get it right with the serious families and stuff that don't need that much space, with the roller cross and the old people. Maybe they'll get it right with the Crown Signia for, again, old people. Again, that's basically an honorary Venza. Maybe they'll get it right, but the Venza's more important, not because it's a Venza, but more because it takes the heat off the RAV4 and makes the RAV4 better. Not to say that the Venza isn't great. That thing was great. I'll get into that later. Now, moving on. So without further ado, let's get into it. The Toyota Venza has 2 generations. We have the first generation, which was introduced in 2009 and then killed off 2015. Toyota, this is weird. Toyota didn't really know how to kill off the Venza, so they kind of kept putting the brakes on year after year, where there were still some sold in 2017, but they were killed off officially in 2015 because they sold so slow. So it was just kind of like, trying to screech to a stop. And then the second generation Toyota Venza, which was sold in 2021 and killed off in 2024. Still being sold as a 2025 at some dealerships, depending on where you live. Well, the first generation was good for many reasons, but unfortunately, for the interestingness of the segment, mainly none of them were on the outside. Now, it was available with either a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder V6 inline-4. The issue here, that should be ringing off alarm bells to people who know Toyota from this era, do not get the one with the 4-cylinder. Those had oil consumption and piston ring problems. The same issues that the Camry at the time had, because they're both based off of the same platform and use the same engines. The V6 in the Camry and the V6 in the Venza was absolutely fine. There was also all-wheel drive for both of them. The outside was pretty boring and normal just to look at. I mean, it was unoffensive except for the front. Again, a lot of people hate the way that the Venzas look. Like, they vehemently hate it. I personally couldn't care. I have more things to worry about than the front of a car. But I think that it doesn't look that bad. The side profile was nice, but again, it cut into rear cargo room by slamping down the side, which was kind of annoying, but I mean, literally every single SUV does that nowadays, and the cut isn't so drastic where you're not going to be able to fit something tall in the back, in the boot end there. Overall, a stylish car from the outside, if not dated. Alright, just like all things with cars, the fun starts inside. Not a whole lot to discuss here, except for everything. This is essentially a Camry that is so versatile, it's great for everything. If you need to move it, it's almost as big as a Toyota Sienna around the back with cargo space. Again, we'll get into dimensions and specifications towards the end of the first generation segment. Toyota cared about this car. You want to know how you can tell? This is one of the only Toyotas, I think there's 2 of them, that has, if you look really closely, you can find it, black stitching on the leather seats. That's right. It has piped black stitching in the stitches on the tan leather seats. Again, a nice touch. Toyota from this era, they didn't care. They were kind of phoning it in a little bit, but with the Venza, they cared a whole lot. It has the comfort of a Camry, yet it has more legroom than a Camry, and these cars will last forever. Now, Toyota and packages are sitting in a tree, and I'm not going to elaborate on what they're doing because this is a family-friendly channel. But let's just say they're quite fond of each other, which means that this car gets really annoying when you try to spec it out. So from 2009 and before the facelift, about 2012, it got really annoying. Literally everything was a package. The stereo, whether you got just a base radio or the upgraded touchscreen navigation system, was a package. Whether you got a cloth interior or a leather interior with heated seats, was a package. Whether you got all-wheel drive or not, was a package. The only thing, and I mean literally the only configuration on this car that was tied to engine size, because again, all-wheel drive was also a package. Toyota loves packages. Especially around this time, apparently. I mean, there's like 1,000 like, if you read the pamphlet for this thing, it's the most confusing thing you'll ever read on it. And the worst part is, everything's available with everything. You can get a leather interior with heated seats on a 4-cylinder front-wheel drive. It's like, I don't get it. Okay, literally the only thing on this car, the only spec thing on this car that is tied to the engine, because that's literally there's no trim levels. It's 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder. That's it, is the wheels. Now, I'm going to tell you why you want a 4-cylinder. The 4-cylinder came with number 1 for wheels. Those were 19-inch wheels. Now, alarm bells are already probably ringing. 19-inch wheels are big. Big wheels are terrible. They suck. Why? Because the tires are small. First of all, the tires are hard to find because they're really annoying and they're usually specialized because, every single car usually uses the same wheel, like lug pattern, size, and tire. Like all Camrys, they're pretty much interchangeable. This thing, it's interchangeable with the hubs, like the pattern for the lug nuts with a regular Camry, which is what I suggest you do. But on that, it's just weird, and replacement tires are more expensive than just regular size tires, like a 15-inch or 16-inch. And they ride like crap. They ride like crap every single bump on the road. Even though this thing has one of the most cushiest suspensions I've ever rode in, all of it somehow makes it into the cabin because these wheels might as well have no tires on the middle. They might as well be wagon wheels. So you want the smaller wheel. You want the 4-cylinder because, again, the 4-cylinder was tied to 1, and if you got a 6-cylinder, by process of elimination, you got 2. The 2 were 20-inch wheels. 20 inches! People made up the Isuzu Via Cross for having 23 inches. That's only 3 inches. They're big wheels, and these rode even worse. So if you get one of these, which a lot of people have done, because when these cars first came out, they got terrible reviews. It handled like crap, didn't drive like a sedan, which it was designed to, and was just shit all around. And that was 100% because of the wheels. That's why Toyota actually decreased the size of the wheels when they brought it back in 2021, because they were too stupid-dupu to figure that out back in the early, 2010s. So get the V6 and just swap them out with literally any Camry wheels. No Camry wheel in history, well, I mean, at least this generation of Camry, like the 6th generation, no wheel from that era of that Camry was bigger than, 17 inches. So just get literally any of those, one that you think fits best with the car. Tires will be easier to find. Now, there is an issue with this. That makes the speedometer and odometer a little less accurate. But the issue is, essentially all you have to do is there's a threshold for how inaccurate your speedometer could do, and depending on the size of the wheels, you can size the wheels down a few inches, and it'll still be within the threshold of accuracy. But if you really want, you can have AI calculate you a thing, which is like add 2 miles or whatever to whatever it says I'm going, and that's the truth. And, usually that works pretty well. But yeah, they rode like crap. Other than that, everything else is all packages, which makes buying them used an absolute nightmare. And then in 2013, we get our Toyota that we know and love, good old pissy, hissy fit Toyota. They spent all this work and all this time designing this car which no one was buying. And they were kind of mad about it. It's like Honda when they found out that the Prius was going to be considered the first ever hybrid, even though it wasn't sold in the States, and technically the Insight is the first one in the US. The Prius is first. It's literally named the Prius. It's called the first. It is the first hybrid. It's like Honda was like, man, this sucks. We spent all the time doing this and no one even wants it. That's like Toyota. We designed this whole thing. We made 9,000 concept cars, and people hate it, and it's sitting on dealer lots. So we got good old phoning it in Toyota. So let's see what the masterminds over at Toyota had for, the master beautiful ideas they had for resurrecting the Venza and making it better. Well, first, and this is going to blow you away, they added daytime running lights that are actually turn signals. That is such a big change. I bet you didn't even notice it. They also added this little silver bar in the bottom grille that kind of connects the 2 headlights together. It doesn't look good from the front, so I wouldn't even put it there because it just looks terrible. They also added turn signals in the mirrors. And it's gonna go crazy. That entire wheel issue? It's fixed. It's gone. There's no more issues with that. The motor that's leaking oil is fine. And you want to know how they solved all of that? This is joking, by the way. They removed the little nubs from the wheels. That's it, right. Go look at the XLE wheels from the previous one, or I'll pull them up here in a second. They removed the little nubs from the wheels. I mean, thank God. That's just what the buyers wanted. You know, those little nubs, they were just so hard to look at. This is something I just don't get. Like, I mean, look at the XLE wheels from the previous generation and now the new generation. It's basically the same wheel. They just ground the nubs off the edges and made it more angular. Like, why? What were they doing? No other car shared wheels with this car, with either of these. So it's not like the car was going out of production and they had to stop making these wheels. In fact, when they were selling this alongside the new generation of Camry, which is why they facelifted it at all instead of just burying it in the ground, they decided that they were going to make it look more like the outgoing Camry, you know, the new Camry. When the XLE wheels from the first generation look more like the Camry wheels from that era than the updated ones do. I mean, what's the point of this? I never got that. I was like, out of all the changes you could have made, you could have given it a different engine without the oil consumption issues, like the regular Camry got. You could have done so much to save the Venza, and all you did was remove the nubs from the wheels and put some shit in the headlights. Are you kidding me? In the interior, all Toyota did was replace the old steering wheel that wasn't in production anymore with a new Toyota steering wheel. Now, the old steering wheel was ugly. It was from the SE Toyota Camry, the Sport Edition, for some ungodly reason. So they finally replaced it with a regular Toyota steering wheel. It's the same one I have in my RAV4, but it's a little bit different. It's got a little bit more buttons. I don't care. It's fine. They also added black and dark gray interior options. And finally, you know, our old friend Packages got old. It died, and Toyota remarried. And they finally decided that the Venza should have trim levels, introducing LE, XLE, and Limited. So wonderful. Yeah, the screen was made standard by this point in time, although some of them are still shipping with radios because that was a dealer option. You could also get carbon fiber instead of wood, and this is kind of where we're wrapping up the first generation and going into the second generation. This isn't the final slide for, the first generation. But it's time for me to address the vertical shifter. A lot of people may look at that dashboard and say it looks weird, and I agree with you. I don't know what Toyota was on, but I don't know what they were thinking. It doesn't look great. But once you sit in the car, you drive the car, and again, I sound like I'm crapping on the Venza. This was the best Camry ever made. This is one of the best Toyotas ever made. It was extremely reliable. It was fast, which we'll get to in a moment. It's going to knock your socks off how fast this thing was. It was extremely reliable. Could do more than a Camry could ever do before. Was as comfortable as a Camry, had more legroom than a Camry, had rear vents like a Camry, drove like a Camry, rode like a Camry, had more room than a Camry, could store more than a Camry. Had all-wheel drive, unlike a Camry. This car was great. But the issue is the interior is, especially the front of it's a little ugly, but it's high quality. Everything feels good. Everything fits together well. And it feels like a Toyota Avalon. That's really what this car feels like. It feels like a luxury vehicle, which is nice. So you want to know what? I'll give Toyota credit for that. Even though the interior isn't the prettiest thing I've ever seen, mainly the gauge console. The rest of it is fine. Even though it's maybe not the prettiest thing that I've seen, it works. It's fine. And honestly, if the only thing you have to worry about in life is the vertical shifter on your car as opposed to being a regular shifter down by the cup holders, you need to get a life. Alright, here we are. It's time for the specs. Now, I've got, again, because this is so confusing, and this is for the entire first generation, it depends on the specs of the car, not the trim level of the car. So for the configuration, for the front-wheel drive 4-cylinder, you get a decent amount of torque, same for the regular, the all-wheel drive is just a little bit more steady. There's not a huge difference. It's also faster in 0 to 60, the all-wheel drive i4 is, and gets a little bit better fuel economy without all-wheel drive, and a little bit more range without all-wheel drive. But other than that, the 4-cylinder is a solid option, but you also need, a nice toe base to put onto that. But the V6, all-wheel drive and front-wheel drive, were pretty fast. It had a 0 to 60 time of 0.7 seconds. 0.7. That's like the International Space Station. That's like a SpaceX flight. No, like a 0 to 60 of 6.7 seconds. Again, if only it were last year, I would be the most popular person on the internet. But yeah. Pretty good for towing, 3,500 pounds. See, no one, unless you tow things, you don't know what that means. Like 3,500 pounds. Well, I mean, that's heavy. That's like a few people, but like, what does that mean? It can tow a Toyota Prius, like a modern day Toyota Prius. It can tow one comfortably. It can tow another car. Like, Yeah, that's a good amount of towing. The range is pretty fine, but yeah. Also, this car is fast. You can put the hammer down in this thing. This is a family wagon. If you put that hammer down, Thor is coming, and he's going to beat up whoever is driving slow in front of you. This thing is faster than a Volkswagen Golf GTI. Because this is the thing that I get mad at. I don't like enthusiast cars. I think a lot of times enthusiast cars are utter tosh. They're poppycock. They're just not as great as everyone makes them out to be. This thing can beat a Golf GTI, and this is some random Toyota that not even I could remember what it was. And I'm literally the patron saint of unremembered cars on Toyota and Japanese car brands on YouTube, and I didn't even know what this thing was. And it's faster than the Volkswagen Golf GTI Mark 5 and Mark 6. I love my Volkswagen Golf. It's faster than Mini Cooper S, the Scion TC, the Ford Mustang V6 from 2011 to 2017, the naturally aspirated version, the Hyundai Velosto Turbo, Pontiac Solstice, let's be real, that was never going to do anything, and the GR86. I mean, everyone fawns over these cars, especially the Miatas and all that stuff, and I get it. Some of these cars, the appeal is not that they're fast, but the Venza, would you rather have an MX-5 Miata or a Venza? Well, according to speed, I think the Venza is the better choice. Now, let's move into the, let's be honest, ever boring second generation. I mean, okay, the exterior, this car is so hard to talk about. This is a Toyota that even I'm uninterested in, and I'm interested in literally everything on the planet. Am I ever going to stop getting notifications? Okay, this car was good for, one reason, and that was because RAV4s got a real expensive during, 2025, 2024, 2023. All the 2020s that are not 2026. And, the Venzas were coming in at, 32 base, and a lot of people like the Venzas because they're hybrid and all-wheel drive, which is what they wanted out of a RAV4 anyway, so they got the Venzas. They're fantastic cars. But they're so boring. I mean, some people would be like, oh, they have an LED, unified taillight. I forgot what LED strip on the back. I don't care. I mean, it was fine. It's a good car. If you own it, good for you. It's a perfectly fine automobile. I can't get interested. I'm sorry. All right, the interior, it's so uninspiring. It had the touchscreen that Toyota wanted to push on everyone. It had the same Toyota steering wheel with the blacked out little chunk in the middle so that you can't put your hand on there, which is kind of annoying. It had an all-digital gauge cluster or a split gauge cluster, depending on whether you got the LE for the partial digital or the limited for the full digital. They had a nightshade version that was kind of boring. They had brown interior. It was kind of boring. It had a not Prius shifter. It was kind of boring. It's kind of like an honorary Prius, but somehow more boring than the Prius family. It was fine. The wheels were good, especially on the XLE and LEs, so I'd aim more for that. You don't really, and again, 18-inch, 19-inch, that's how they should have done in the beginning. No 20-inch, because those just ruined the ride quality on the previous generation. I probably shouldn't tow with it. 0 to 60 is pretty slow. It's a hybrid standard, all-wheel drive standard. They're not bad cars. In fact, they're great cars. They're just, there's something about them. They're just like a modern Toyota. There's nothing interesting about it. And that sounds horrible, but I mean, it really is. Now, moving on to the section about if you want to buy one. This is my favorite part because they take so much time. And when I did Car of the Week, I would never do a Car of the Week because every single week. So I'm so happy to get it over with. And my favorite section is coming up, the buying section, where I cheaply and just easily record my screen while I look at listings. Except the actual official, Commin Quokka reason is so that way you get an accurate price and you trust my judgment. Without further ado, let's get on to the easy section. Woohoo! Let's get into it. First, prices. You can expect to pay about $28,000. Again, for 2023, 2021, that is a fantastic price for a Toyota product that is this modern and this relevant. And if we get inside the thing that's not working, again, they're fine. They're great cars. They're nice to ride in. They have great ride quality. What can we say? It's fine. Here's another one. The 2015s are pretty good. The XLE all-wheel drive, so they're nice. They're good. They're generally good vehicles. Again, felt very luxurious on the outside. Not a whole lot too interesting with these models. You can see up close and personal. It's really not that complicated. Get used to it. See that piping there? See, I told you. Toyota, they were trying, man. It also has the same module here that it had in the Camry, which is nice. And you get some home garage door settings that you didn't have. You get one of them. That's crazy. I think these other two are just spacers. So, thanks, Toyota. There's also not a whole lot of headliner issues. Also, this could be optioned with the double sunroof, moonroof combo, one for the back, one for the front. So that was, El Nito. The back seat is kind of nice. It's really nice. You have vents back there. Again, that nice leather piping. They're the most comfortable seats you'll ever sit in. On a modern Toyota product, that is. Again, this is a more modern steering wheel. This one's been grayed out for some reason. They also had this era of Toyota controls, so this is really like your multi-information display, which you control with the buttons on the steering wheel. This might as well just be down there, except it also controls climate control. You know, not a whole lot, and you got the real controls for this up here, like these three. That's the main way you're going to use it. Everything in this car feels nice. This also has one of those gauge cluster designs, which just feels so premium, luxury, and nice, even though it doesn't really, match together that great. But it's kind of nice. And then for, these, they're pretty nice. They're fine. There's no issue with them. The interior is a little weird. I always thought this was a little bit, bulbous and awkward. It's nice that they show you the temperature there. The touch capacitive controls get a little annoying, though, and this screen just looks like it was forced in there. I mean, it's just this huge, big rectangle. I mean, I'm glad that they brought it back, and I think we always need a Venza equivalent, but what are you gonna do? And then we have the Venza's replacement over there. By far a much better replacement than this generation of Venza. At least that car is something you get excited about, a small, cheap car. Anyway, with that, thank you for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. And I will see you all real soon. Goodbye now.